Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is Lollipop and today we are actually just going to be doing a comparison on three specific models of three different bike lineups for 2021, which are the Trek Marlin series, Specialized Rockhopper lineup, and Giant Talon bikes. Now, I have already made a video comparing these lineups as a whole, and in that video I compared the Specialized Rockhopper Sport to the Giant Talon 2 and the Trek Marlin 6, since those bikes had a similar part spec and price level. However, I have received a good amount of comments from people who want a comparison on the higher end models in this range, so today I'm going to be comparing and contrasting the 2021 Specialized Rockhopper Comp, Giant Talon 1, and Trek Marlin 7, covering everything from the suspension forks to the drivetrains, including all of the drivetrain components. I will also be filling out this table at the end of the video and talking about my thoughts on which bike is the best at the very end. And since I do not want to repeat myself and make this video too long, I am going to skip all the background information on these lineups and some of the more in-depth details about the frame geometry, since I have already covered that in my previous comparison, which is still linked to this video on the top right. However, I will show the main specifications right now if you are interested. Basically, the Giant Talon frame has the most modern geometry that is closest to a trail bike, so it will be better at descending than the other bikes based on the geometry alone. And on the opposite side, the Trek Marlin has geometry numbers closest to a cross-country mountain bike, so it will be better for pedaling efficiency and speed. Additionally, I won't be covering every single difference like I do in my other videos, and that is because these bikes are from different brands, so pretty much all of the in-house components are technically different, like the handlebars, the stems, the rims, and things like that, but they are not different enough to really justify choosing one of these bikes over another, in my opinion. Therefore, I'm going to jump right into the comparison, starting with the prices. The Specialized Rockhopper Comp is the least expensive bike out of the three, coming in at $800 or 675 pounds. The Giant Talon 1 is then $30 more at $830, but surprisingly less expensive in pounds at 650 pounds. And lastly, there's the Trek Marlin 7, which is priced $20 more at $850 or 725 pounds. For the components, I'm going to start off with one of the main ones, which is the suspension fork. All the bikes use quick release axles in the front to make it easy to take the wheel off the bike, and all the suspension forks come with a lockout feature which allows you to turn a knob on the fork to make it fully rigid and stiff, which makes pedaling much more efficient in flat areas or when you're riding uphill. All of these forks also come with 100mm of travel in most sizes, which is typical for cross-country oriented bikes like these, but the Rockhopper Comp uses 90mm of travel for sizes extra small and small, while the Talon 1 uses 80mm of travel for those smaller sizes. The Marlin 7 actually still uses 100mm of travel for all sizes. The Rockhopper Comp uses an SR Suntour XCM29 fork, which uses a coil spring and has 30mm wide stanchions. This fork has custom multi-circuit damping from Specialized to make it smoother and handle bumps better, but overall this fork is fairly entry level. The Talon 1 upgrades to the RockShox Judy fork, which also has 30mm wide stanchions and uses a coil spring, but this fork is a higher level than the Suntour XCM and has better damping. It's worth noting that in the United States and potentially some other countries, the Talon 1 may come with the SXC32RL29 fork instead. Has a pretty long name, but it is a new fork made by Giant themselves. This fork actually uses wider 32mm diameter stanchions for added strength and stiffness, and is an air fork rather than a coil spring fork, which means it is much lighter and more adjustable for your weight. It also has a rebound adjustment knob on the bottom to basically control how quickly the fork bounces back after being compressed. And then finally, the Marlin 7 uses a RockShox Judy fork, which is the same fork mentioned before from the Talon 1. Next, I'm going to talk about the tires. All of these bikes come with wire bead tires that are not tubeless ready, and most of them come with 29-inch diameter wheels, except for the extra small frame size bikes, which come with 27.5-inch diameter wheels. 29er wheels are known to be faster and roll over terrain better, while the 27.5 wheels are known to be more nimble and better for playful riding like jumping, and can be more comfortable for shorter riders. The Rockhopper Comp comes with the ground control sport tires that are 2.3 inches wide, while the Talon 1 uses Maxxis Recon tires that are a bit wider at 2.4 inches. And then the Marlin 7 uses thinner 2.2 inch wide Bontrager XR2 Comp tires. Wider tires provide more traction on trails but also make the bike slightly heavier. The Marlin has the thinnest tires, though 2.2 inches is pretty normal for cross country, while the Talon and Rockhopper have wider tires, which will be noticeably better in terms of grip and traction. Moving on, we have the brakes. All the bikes use hydraulic disc brakes with 160mm diameter brake rotors in the rear. The Specialized Rockhopper Comp uses Shimano MT200 brakes with 180mm front rotors in most sizes, while the Giant Talon 1 uses the Tektro brand TKD 143 brakes, which also use a 180mm front rotor. The Marlin 7 uses the same brakes as the Rockhopper, but only uses the larger 180mm front rotor for sizes large to extra large. Overall, these brakes are pretty similar in terms of stopping power, but the Shimano brakes are known to be more reliable, and having a larger front rotor definitely increases stopping power, so that's nice to see. And finally, I'm going to talk about the main difference among these bikes, which is the drivetrain. I'm going to list out the main drivetrain components first, and then talk about which one I think is the best. The Rockhopper Comp uses a mainly microshift Advent 1x9 drivetrain, which means that there is one chainring in the front crankset and 9 gears or cogs in the rear cassette, for a total of 9 speeds. This bike also uses a 30-tooth stout crankset paired to a 9-speed microshift Advent cassette, which has 11 teeth on the smallest cog and 42 teeth on the largest cog. And it has a microshift Advent rear derailleur as well. And I should mention that all three of these bikes come with a clutch mechanism on the rear derailleur, which allows you to add tension to the chain to prevent it from falling off the bike or making a lot of chain slap noise. I should also note that the Specialized Rockhopper Comp in some other countries like the United Kingdom actually only comes with a 2x9 drivetrain with mixed Shimano Altus and Acera parts, which is actually very different from the microshift one I just discussed, but I can talk about this more at the end of the video. Next, I'm going to talk about the Talon 1 and the Marlin 7 simultaneously, since they have pretty similar drivetrains. Both of these bikes use a mainly Shimano Dior 1x10 drivetrain, but the Giant has a Pro Wheel Charm 30 or 32 tooth crankset depending on the wheel size, while the Marlin 7 uses a smaller 28 tooth crankset. Having less teeth on the front chainring allows for easier pedaling, but having more teeth allows you to essentially go faster. The Talon 1 also uses a Shimano Dior 11 to 42 tooth cassette, and although the Marlin 7 uses a Shimano Dior cassette as well, that one has a 46 tooth cog on the very top, allowing for an easier gear for climbing uphill. And then finally, both bikes use the same Shimano Dior rear derailleur, which is very good, smooth, and very fast as well. So for an overall look at these drivetrains, the Specialized bike has the least amount of gears, so you won't have as many incremental speeds for going just a little bit faster or slower as you would in the 1x10 drivetrains, but the microshift drivetrain is not bad. It has been getting more popular because of how affordable it is, but when it is up against the Shimano Dior 1x10, the Shimano drivetrains definitely beat it out because they're just known to be very reliable and good performers out on the trail. Once again, there's nothing wrong with the Specialized, but having one more speed for the 1x10 does make a difference. In terms of the differences between the Talon and the Marlin has a better gear for uphill climbing and less teeth on the front chainring, so it will overall be a better climber than the other two bikes, and it will have gear ratios that are more for ease of use rather than carrying speed. The Talon with its 30 or 32 tooth chainring will be faster based on the drivetrain alone, but it will be more difficult to climb with that bike, though that may only be noticeable on steeper and longer climbs. And finally, before I talk about these bikes as a whole, I'm going to quickly talk about how much each bike weighs. Now, Trek is the only brand out of these bikes that gives us the official weights of their bikes, and they have the Marlin listed at around 30.35 pounds or 13.77 kilograms. I have looked around and seen several videos of all of these bikes, and it seems like all of them, including the Marlin 7, tend to weigh at around 29.5 pounds, or around 13.5 kilograms, so there actually shouldn't be too much of a difference among them all. Alright, so now that I've covered all those components and key details, I'm going to show you the completed table with all those differences in one place, and talk about which bike I think is the best for a specific rider. Now this happened in my last video as well, but unfortunately for the Specialized bikes, they're always just a little bit less expensive than the other two bikes, which is nice if you are on a budget, but for the sake of the comparison, it also means that they will likely have lower end parts and not be the best bike out of the three. Nonetheless, one of these bikes has to be the least expensive, and even though the Rockhopper is the cheapest, it still has a better brake setup than the other two bikes, but like I mentioned before, the brakes are pretty similar overall. In my opinion, the Rockhopper Comp is still a great beginner mountain bike, but for only $30 or $50 more, you could get some nicer upgrades if you go with the Giant or Trek bikes. And if you're in the UK, getting the Giant Talon or Trek Marlin would be a pretty big upgrade for the small price increase, or actually even a decrease if the prices in the pounds are correct on the websites. The Giant Talon 1 definitely has the best tires out of the three for trail riding, and that paired with its geometry and potentially the air suspension fork, it is definitely the best for trail riding in my opinion. The Trek is the best for cross-country riding, but it is definitely still going to work for trail riding if you want it for that reason. Ultimately, these bikes are not that different from one another, but if you can find the Giant Talon 1 with the air fork, that is definitely the best deal out of the three. If you find that one with the RockShox Judy fork instead, it is still not a bad bike, but it's kind of more up to you on which riding style you prefer, either more cross-country like the Trek or more trail like the Giant. Once again, all of these are just my thoughts. I'm not saying I'm 100% correct or anything, and I'm happy to see what other people think in the comments below, so if you have anything to add or think I made a mistake somewhere, please let me know in the comments section. But in the end, I hope this video helped you out in some way, and if it did, please leave a like and subscribe, and remember to keep biking.